So hello, all of you, and welcome to SITSI India 2020, the National Conference on Citizen Science for Biodiversity. With an increased interest in citizen science in India, this is a good time for all of us to come together and compare notes and to get to know each other. In 2018, a workshop on citizen science for biodiversity was hosted by the Wildlife Institute of India in Dehradun, at which there were perhaps 40 participants. But an online conference such as this, of course, provides the opportunity for many, many more people to get together and interact. And this is reflected in the number of registrations. Nearly 1,000 people have registered to get together and interact, to participate in this conference. And I trust that many of you are watching this live. So this promises to be an exciting conference. We'll have keynote talks, panel discussions, contributed short talks, contributed posters over the 4 days of the conference. So just to start off, a quick introduction to the people who worked to make this conference happen. They're here on this call. Most of them are on this video today. On the steering committee are Farida Tampal from the WWF India in Hyderabad. There's Pankaj Sheksaria from IIT Bombay, Nandini Rajamani from Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research in Tirupati, R. Prabhakar from Strand Life Sciences, Shannon Olson from the National Center for Biological Sciences, TIFR. There's myself, Suhail Khader from the Nature Conservation Foundation. And then, of course, nothing would have been possible with two other people, the conference coordinator, Akshata Pradhan, and Amit Kumar, who's behind the web development and tech support. SITSI India 2020 is organized by the Biodiversity Collaborative under the umbrella of the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India and the National Biodiversity Authority. More about this from Shannon. Over to you, Shannon.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to have you participate in the conference. It's been so fun to interact with you on Slack, and I hope that you'll continue to do so throughout the conference. So this conference has been initiated by the Biodiversity Collaborative, which several of the members of the organizing committee are part of. And the Biodiversity Collaborative is a growing network of several institutions and individuals across India and also internationally who have been working together since July 2018 with several government agencies to develop and prepare the groundwork for the National Mission on Biodiversity and Human Well-Being. So the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India has been supporting the Biodiversity Collaborative to implement this preparatory phase of the national mission. The national mission will be one of 9 national missions that have been approved by the Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council last year. The mission will strengthen science and of restoring and conserving India's national heritage, embedded biodiversity as a key consideration in its developmental programs. And it has several different components, everything from ecosystem services to climate change and agriculture, medicinal plants, and also, of course, citizen science outreach and communication, and many others. So if you want to hear a little bit more about the organizations that are involved in the Biodiversity Collaborative, you can find these on the main page of our website, and you can read about them. And you can also follow us on our Twitter handles. The Twitter handle for Biodiversity Collaborative is I'm sorry, just a second, I had to find it, BioDiv Collab, and you can look us up on the web, so that would be great. So I will now hand it over to Prabhakar, who, back to Sahil, who will talk a little bit about the rationale for the science conference. Sorry, I was juggling many pages at once,
So just briefly, why are we having this conference now? And of course, citizen science efforts are expanding across the country, and it seems like just the right time to get everybody together to discuss what we're doing collectively, to identify opportunities and gaps, and to reflect on our work, and of course, to meet everyone else who shares the same interests. So in this conference, our goals have been first to provide a platform where anyone doing citizen science on biodiversity in India can present their work so that we get to know what's happening in the field. And we also have panels which will discuss some broader issues that underpin the work we do. And most importantly, we're doing this on a platform, which is Slack, that provides for a lot of interactivity. Prabhakar will talk more about the actual program.
Hi, welcome to the Citizen Science SITSI 2020 program. This is the first one that we are organizing. So this is a 4-day conference, and it will cover the exciting field of citizen science in India. It's really organized as a regular conference, which means there is an intense 4-day period. And in these strange times, the meet and greet and exchange will happen virtually over devices and text. So, we can't meet together in a venue. It'll all happen over online virtually. We have a large fair. We have 4 keynote speakers, all eminent in their fields, covering a diverse set of topics from school science programs and conservation action programs to democratizing public science. We have 3 panel discussions. These will be interactive panel discussions between the panel coordinator and a group. One of it is to explore opportunities and possibilities in citizen science. The second one will be to build and will be on building and leveraging technology for citizen science. And the third is to listen to you people, the participants on and archivists and documenters who drive and engage in citizen science activities. We have over 30 contributed talks ranging from citizen engagement by hobbyists and anglers to leveraging citizen science for big cat conservations. The first day, we've themed the 4 days into 4 different themes. The first day theme will be citizen science projects. The theme for the second day will be scope and opportunities of citizen science and the use of citizen science for various actions on conservation. The third day's theme will be how technology and platforms are being leveraged for citizen science projects. And the last will be you, citizens and participants. All the talks are pre-recorded. They will be played out during the precise times. So we will have to stick to time. We will stick to time. And the presenter will be available for questions and answers. Finally, we have 60 contributed posters covering a whole range of topics. You can browse the posters anytime. You can question and interact with the presenters. And these are the facilities that an online platform provides. The focus of the conference is, of course, to expose and interact. And the virtual platform, although it prohibits in some ways to physically meet, it provides certain other opportunities for persistent one-to-one interaction. You can talk to anybody one-to-one and many-to-many interactions as well. The presentations and videos will be available beyond the conference period. And so enjoy the conference. Look forward to an exciting 4 days. Thank you. Nandini? Nandini, you're muted.
Nandini, you're muted.
Thank you. All right. So as you must all know by now, SeasonWatch India is an entirely virtual event. In fact, even us organizers are in different places, some even outside the country. So there are a couple of ways you can participate. If you are a public participant, and by this we mean someone who's not registered but only wants to watch the lectures and panels, you can use the conference website. We will live stream all events there. The conference website is sitsci-india.org. If you are a registered participant, then the conference Slack workspace is your go-to place to interact with what's happening during the conference, to watch videos, to talk to other participants or to us. So far, we already see over 300 people on our Slack platform, and there's a lot of activity which kind of began on Saturday during the pre-conference session. If you missed this session, please don't worry. You can find instructions on how to engage with the conference in our Guide to Slack channel within the workspace. We have a Google Doc link pinned to the top with instructions, as well as a video made by Shannon for you to get a clearer idea of how to work with Slack and specifically with SeasonWatch India. Do keep an eye on the announcements channel for all upcoming events, whether it's a break or the next session, or to ask you to move to another channel. And do introduce yourself to everyone using the introductions channel. So we'll see you on Slack. I'd like to ask Farida to take it away.
Thank you, Nandini. So in a few minutes from now, we shall start with the keynote talk from the first speaker today morning. We are as excited as all of you. The SeasonWatch conference has come together with support from the Biodiversity Collaborative, Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, National Biodiversity Authority. And on behalf of the organizing committee of the first SeasonWatch conference, I thank them all for their support. I thank organizing committee members for the numerous hours put together to brainstorm on the structure and the platform for the conference. I must acknowledge Akshita's pivotal role and Amit for understanding our requirements and coming up with tech solutions as per our many demands. They had a Herculean task, and if not for their diligence, we would have got entangled in the many threads of our channel. I thank all the talk and poster presenters as well as the rest of the participants for their enthusiastic and overwhelming response, and we look forward to an exciting 4-day event. Over to you, Suhail. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'll end this introductory session with another warm welcome to all of you. Please do ask questions, interact, and share your thoughts through this conference. And you can continue even after. As mentioned earlier, the workspace will remain open until at least 10th of October. So let's get to know each other and help each other take citizen science for biodiversity into a new future in the country. We'll resume after a short break with our first keynote talk in the same channel, which is day 1, 28 September, Geetha. So stay in this channel, and we'll have Geetha's keynote presentation very soon. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so welcome to the first actual session of the SITSI India 2020 conference and the first keynote presentation by Geetha Ramaswami. So Dr. Geetha Ramaswami has a PhD in plant ecology from the Center for Ecological Sciences at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Her postdoctoral research at the Nature Conservation Foundation followed up on her earlier research into the invasive plant Lantana camara, in examining how frugivorous birds respond to lantana and in turn affect its dispersal. For the past 3 years, Geetha has headed SeasonWatch, which is a citizen science project that engages school children as well as adults in documenting the seasonality of trees and how this may be affected by climate. And this is what Geetha will be talking about today for all of us. So please join me in welcoming Geetha. Give her virtual claps, and over to you, Geetha. Thank you.
Thanks, Suhail. Thanks for the very warm welcome. And thank you for the organizing committee of SITSI 2020 to give me this opportunity to speak on this platform and reach out to so many people from across the country. It's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to being a participant here. I'm sorry, I have a bit of a bad throat, so I might take a break in between to drink some water. I'd like to share my screen now, and please let me know if you can see it. Can you see? Is my screen visible?
All set, Geetha.
Or can someone just...
Yes.
All right. Thanks. All right. So to jump right in, I'm going to be talking about seasons of change, how we can do both science and learning through observation. The first picture over here is that of a common crow butterfly. It is a lepidopteran, and it goes through a life cycle where it goes from a larval stage to a cocoon stage and then emerges as a butterfly. Oftentimes in peninsular India, you can also see them flying en masse, doing migration. The second picture over here is that of the pied cuckoo. Across India, it is famous in folklore as a harbinger of the monsoon, and sometimes precedes the onset of the monsoon across the country. The third picture over here is the Indian ghost tree. This very intriguing name for this tree comes from its pale white bark that stretches and shines white, especially in the deciduous season when it is leafless. Many decades ago, this particular ghost tree would have begun its life cycle as a tiny seedling, would have overcome many environmental adversities to become a sapling, and then finally grow into this tree, which does this cyclical putting out of new leaves, putting out of flowers, putting out of fruits, maturing of leaves, and then shedding it all in the dry deciduous season. The study of these cyclical changes that come in organisms is known as phenology. And plant phenology in particular can be a great indicator of how the larger climate is changing with time. It's no news to anyone over here that our climate is getting affected by human activities. And one of the most apparent changes in the environment is the increase in global surface temperatures. And especially in the temperate regions, this manifests itself in a change in the phenology of tree species. Let's quickly jump over to the temperate latitudes for a bit and understand more about this. Sorry. In the temperate latitudes, there is a particular growing season for woody plant species. This is the season uh, after the dry, cold winter season, where there is very limited resource availability for plants to actually grow. They are also probably surrounded by ice and snow and frost. These are not particularly good growing conditions. Once the growing season sets in, the cycle of the leaf continues, where it emerges from buds synchronously, and the synchronous emergence of vegetative leaf buds is known as budburst. And this continues through the life cycle of the leaf, where it grows, it expands, it becomes mature, and then around the time when the temperature starts falling again, the leaves change color dramatically and they fall. And this is known as the leaf fall. In temperate regions, the duration between the bud burst and the leaf fall is known as the growing season. And it is highly tuned to the temperature, the environmental temperature. So one may expect that bud burst is actually a response to warming of the environment, that is the perception of growth condition by the tree in the environment. And this is basically is a physiological response after a few days of chilling. When there are a few days of warmth, then the tree puts out new buds. And the duration of this the growth period between bud burst and leaf fall is now over the recent few decades being found to expand. That is, the so-called spring season is setting in earlier, and the so-called autumn season of leaf fall is setting in later. Now, this expansion of the growth season has dramatic effects on the trophic system downstream. One of the most classical examples of this is that of a very beautiful food chain that has been described over several decades of the Quercus robur or the pedunculate oak, its association with the winter moth larvae and all the creatures that eat the winter moth larvae. So the pedunculate oak, like any other temperate tree species, puts out new leaves during the spring season, and this bud burst is accompanied by is synchronized with the hatching of the winter moth larvae from their eggs. And this is because the winter moth larvae use the emerging buds of pedunculate oak as food. Now, this particular hatching of winter moth larvae is synchronized with the nesting period of passerine birds such as the great, and they use the winter moth larvae in turn to feed their chicks and therefore to raise their fledglings. What is happening with increasing temperatures globally is that the pedunculate oak is now putting out buds a full 2 weeks earlier than before. Now, 2 weeks doesn't seem like a long time, it's only 15 days. But for a small animal like the winter moth larva, this may affect its entire life cycle. So the winter moths have now adapted to hatching earlier. So they have synchronized now with the bud burst, which is now occurring earlier. And whereas the passerine birds, which are dependent on the winter moth larvae as food, are still nesting at the same time. So some studies have in fact found that these passerine birds may in fact be devoid of the resources that they are used to typically finding at this time. So this is sort of like a direct evidence of how climatic change is affecting the phenology of one particular plant, and that in turn is affecting the phenology of everything else downstream. Now, the information that goes into creating understanding of this sort cannot be done over 1 or 2 years. These are long-term studies requiring at least decadal scales of information. Over time, actually, you would be surprised to know that people have been keeping a record of phenology of plants more than anything else. And this is understandable, right? That's because people sow crops. They want to know when crops would do best, and they want to know understand the phenology of crops and other trees and other plants which are culturally important to them. So one of the oldest citizen science projects actually is from the city of Kyoto in Japan, which dates back nearly 1200 years, where the princely courtiers used to keep records of when the iconic cherry blossom used to come into full flower in the city. And in this really interesting graph, you can see that how a long-term record by citizen scientists has led to, an understanding of how global climatic change has affected the phenology of trees. You would notice that from 800 AD to nearly 1900 AD, the cherry blossom peak flowering happened between 10th and 20th of April. But after the onset of the Industrial Revolution and in the last century or so, the date of peak flowering has now shifted by a whole 5 days. And this, in fact, this information has been used by scientists now to recreate past climate, understanding the understanding of the change in phenology of trees now. So citizen scientists basically have the ability to contribute data over very long terms and over very long time periods, and this is essential for understanding phenology and effects of climate change on plant phenology. The other thing that citizen scientists can do is contribute information over very large spatial scale. Now, scientists in our research labs are based in some corners of the country, in very small parts of the country, and at best we can do intensive monitoring of a small part of the country. Whereas citizen science based everywhere have the ability to contribute information from anywhere that they are based in. So this particular map is from the USA National Phenology Network, where they use citizen science information on the flowering and leafing of particular species and compare that against the historically known information. This is data that is combined from something called the Nature's Notebook, which is a citizen science initiative. And this is combined with mainstream scientific research station information. And for this year, you can see on September 17, 2020, for a few species that they were monitoring, how the leaf out, the emergence of new leaves was affected compared to the long-term average. So all the red areas are 20 days early. So the southeastern part of the US experienced heavy emergence of leaves before time, whereas the northwestern part of the country experienced delayed phenology. And this is excellent to understand long-term effects of things like climate change on phenology. So citizen scientists have the power to contribute information over large scales, over long time, and this is precisely the kind of information we need to understand how the climate affects biodiversity. But let's jump on to the tropics. What happens in the tropics? The tropics are not as neat as the temperate region. There is no growing season for most trees in the tropics. This is because there is no spring, no predefined spring. There's no predefined autumn, and this is because there's a diversity of phenological strategies that are present in tropical trees. So there might be aseasonal flowering, there might be annual flowering, there might be once in 3 years flowering and fruiting for certain types of tropical species. In the leaf fall strategies, some species might adopt deciduous strategies where they drop all their leaves in a particular season. They might have evergreen strategies and so on. These strategies are so diverse that you may find different populations of the same species exhibiting different strategies, different species present in the same locality in a community exhibiting different strategies, and different communities of plants across different geographies exhibiting different set of strategies. So it's particularly difficult to understand how in the tropics the trees themselves are adopting seasonal strategies of phenology and how that is affected by environmental factors like temperature, which have been shown to actually affect some of these strategies. Precipitation, because we have such a marked monsoon season in most tropical regions. So precipitation might be expected to be something that affects tree phenology, as well as day length. Now, in the tropics, actually temperature and precipitation, temperature might be something that is constant through the year, showing very little variation. But day length is something that does vary because of the solstices, etc. This might be something that might be affecting the growing season of trees in the tropics. So Basically, this is a research gap. We need more information on the phenology of trees in the tropics so that we can better understand how the climate change and its effects on temperature, precipitation in the tropical regions affects the phenology of trees and the trophic interactions downstream. Again, in the tropics, the trophic interactions are expected to be very complex and not linear, like the example that I just gave. So changes in one aspect of phenology of a plant are likely to affect many other things, may or may not affect many other things downstream, the way it happens in temperate. Let's hop on into India to see what all kinds of phenology information we have in India. These red dots you see all across the country are a summary of all the phenology projects that are there based in the country. But these are not long term in the sense that very few of these studies span decadal or more time scales. The other thing is that these are studies that happen independently in different time periods, and therefore at the same time we do not have a large scale assessment of plant phenology. I would like to make a note of two citizen science projects that are already doing some bit of phenology monitoring as part of their inputs into the citizen science project. One is the India Biodiversity Portal, and the other is iNaturalist, both of which allow you to add a little note on the phenology of the organism that you're contributing to the program. But I would now like to talk about this particular citizen science project called SeasonWatch, which is designed specifically to understand how tropical trees phenology changes with seasons, and therefore, over the long term, how does climate change affect the phenology of this tree. SeasonWatch was started in 2010, and over the past 10 years, we have had contributions across the country. There are about more than 4 lakh observations on more than 87,000 trees from across the country, which are contributed by interested individuals as well as participating schools. Most of our participants contribute their information via our website or via our Android app. Just to quickly give you a summary of who contributes to our program, over the past 10 years or so, both individuals and schools that have registered with us and contribute information on registered trees has increased, especially since the year 2017. That was when our app was introduced. And in 2018, again, you see a spike in participants, and that is because we introduced another interesting idea that you could report phenology just once, as opposed to registering a tree with us and then reporting its phenology every week. If you come to where most of our information comes from, Kerala is ranked 1 with an average contribution of 316 observations per contributor over the past 10 years. This is followed by Andhra with 92, Uttarakhand with 74, and Meghalaya with 70 observations per contributor. However, just because somebody contributes doesn't mean that they are also contributing regularly. So in SeasonWatch, the ideal type of information is when you register a tree and observe it every week and contribute so that across the year, the changes in the tree with every season can be recorded reliably. So we sort of make an estimation of reliability of that information by assessing consistency among our contributors. And anyone who contributes more than half the number of weeks, data for more than half the number of weeks in a year is considered consistent. And you may see that although the total number of our contributors keeps increasing every year, the number of consistent users, that is, people who contribute more than 23 weeks of information, stays more or less constant and is less than 100. All of these contributors contribute information on a list of 134 species, but all of these species are not present everywhere, and many people also find it difficult to identify all the species that are there on our list. There are some species, because of the ease of identifiability, depending on how common they are and how much people use them in their daily lives, tend to get recognized lots more and therefore observed much more. The top of our species list is jackfruit, with more than 50,000 observations over the past 10 years from more than 1,900 registered trees. Followed closely by mango. This includes all the varieties of mango. This is because there are hundreds of varieties of mango in India and we cannot really distinguish between all the varieties. So we sort of combine all the varieties of mango together. And for mango, we have more than 45,000 observations from more than 1,900 trees. This is followed, of course, by tamarind and amla, both beloved fruit trees of India, finding much mention in our stories, in our food, and in our culture. So when we have enough information from enough number of trees for enough amount of time, we can create a reliable pattern of the phenology over time. Now you would wonder that for something like mango, it should be fairly easy to find the phenology of the plant over time, right? But apart from finding some obscure mentions in regional floras or botanical guides, it's really difficult to come by, fine-scale temporal information on mango fruiting, flowering, and leafing. So with the help of SeasonWatch, from the years 2014 up to 19, we were able to combine all the information that is there on the emergence of leaf, flower, and fruit in mango and convert this into a time frame across the year. What you see here is basically peaks in flower and peak in fruit of the mango tree, depending on the week of the year. These vertical bars indicate an error for the it's basically the variability over the past 5 years. And this light gray line over here is basically the leafing. So what we understand from here is that mango has leaf most of the time. This might be surprising to people who might have observed deciduousness in mango. The other thing is that the peak of fruiting occurs around the 15th week of the year, which is April, May of the year. And that might be surprising to you all as well, because most people associate mango with the season summer. And most people associate the summer season with June, July, end of May, June, and July. And this surprising result is here because most of this information, 80% of the information that we get is from the state of Kerala. And indeed, in the state of Kerala, peak fruiting happens in the months of March, April, and May. And this was apparent when we did a countrywide assessment across different seasons. But within the same 3-4 days of the different seasons, we made an assessment of where all the trees of mango were fruiting. So if you just pay attention to this text over here, it indicates the time of the year, and this number indicates the percentage of trees that were fruiting at that time of the year. The gray dots indicate all trees that were reported in these 4 times of the year, and the yellow dots indicate the fruiting trees. So if you see in December, Kerala, the region showed most amount of fruiting. By March, the fruiting had spread all across peninsular India, including a report from the islands. By June, the fruiting had spread all the way up to the north, and most of the northern latitudes were also showing fruiting trees. And by September, they had receded back to being only present in the southern part of India. Now, this is another interesting thing that we do not find in available sources of phenological information, the variability in the latitudes with time. So basically, we sort of concluded that the information that we get from SeasonWatch is actually quite good at present to form a baseline information on the phenology of some of the tropical tree species, especially the ones that are most widely observed, such as jackfruit, mango, etc. However, this information is still not enough to form correlations with environmental factors. This is because for individual trees as well as for species, we do not have enough information per week to be able to find out correlations between the environmental factors such as, let's say, precipitation and temperature. Yeah, so the correlations at this point are a little bit difficult to make. The other thing we found was that most of our contributions, because they come from schools, if you remember, about more than 900 schools are registered with SeasonWatch, and the bulk of the information comes from students observing trees. And we thought that this is a great opportunity for taking kids outdoors. In this day and age, we realize that the connect between children and nature is going down. Firstly, because of the burden of school education, it's classroom bound, and there's very little opportunity to do anything outside of textbooks and to have a better understanding of the environment in anything other than the EVS that is taught in schools. So SeasonWatch, we thought, was a great opportunity to go outdoors, look at a tree again and again, and in the process also form a bond with trees. And because we work with educators in trying to get more observations for SeasonWatch, we asked them what it is that they thought would be useful in getting kids to go outdoors. And many of the teachers actually anecdotally told us about all the experiences the children were having with trees, about going and noticing trees again and again, how they were concerned about the health of the trees as they were monitoring, how they saw differences in the same in two individuals of the same species behaving at the same time, and how they were able to even devise experiments to quickly check why one tree was doing one thing and the other tree was doing another. And so we gathered some of our more involved educators in a national teachers meet, where people from South India, Central India, and Northeast India came together, and we sort of brainstormed and came up with some ideas as to what will get kids excited about nature. Now, the one thing we did with them was to play lots of games. We wanted to assess whether playing games was a good way of developing a better understanding of the environment. So here you can see all of our teachers playing something called the variation game, where they drew cards from a lot and they had to move according to cards that were dealt to them. And at the end, it sort of gave them an idea of the variation that one expects in a population of a particular species, variation in phenology that one expects in a population of species. Another activity was centered around going to a tree that one was observing, and within the perimeter of certain radius, within a certain radius within this tree, map everything, every living thing that is found, and sort of give it a separate icon and measure the distance from the central tree to that particular living organism. Now, the teachers actually took some of these games and immediately reproduced them in their school. So one of the examples was this thing called a nature bingo, where there are these blocks with certain things like yellow flower, flying birds, spider web, etc. And the teachers were asked to go around the campus where this meeting was held, and they were supposed to find these things that in one row or in one column, and they were supposed to shout bingo. And this particular exercise was so exciting that it was immediately translated into many of the schools when they went back. And here, this picture that you see is actually drawn by one of the children of one of the teachers. So she basically replicated it from the teacher's nature bingo sheet. And the whole day, the kids spent playing nature bingo. So to also see if SeasonWatch had the opportunity of teaching children a bit more about understanding trees, we thought we'd also do a pilot set of activities where we would give children some activities to do and see if they were better able to understand more things about the trees. The first set of activities was designed to understand that trees have different parts, and these are characteristics or based on which you can classify or distinguish between tree species. So we gave them activities. Some of these are in collaboration with other colleagues at NCF, where they understood ideas like symmetry, shape, and size. Replicated some of the shapes that they saw in nature on their paper. There was another activity that helped them look at how the life cycle of a leaf, how it went from being a tiny little leaf just emerged from a bud to a large mature leaf before it was shed. So there were a number of activities exploring plant parts, exploring things especially about the leaves, exploring things especially about the flowers and fruits. And then based on the characters that the children noted about these things, they were sort of started comparing trees and started distinguishing between different types of trees. So just to show you all the amazing things that came up during these activities, children had classified leaves as eel-shaped or butterfly-shaped or umbrella-shaped, etc. Just the kind of shape that only, I guess, children can think of. And when it came to size, it was not simply measuring in centimeters with a scale, but relatively things like large but not larger than the leaf. There were also observations and stories which they associated with the different trees. Things like, a string of jasmine was actually used as a measuring length earlier. And this was something that occurred to them while thinking about flowers in their activity. Some of them went ahead and did their own experiments and, made observations like leaf was waxy and therefore it floated on the water for some time before sinking. Some students who were drawing the leaves faithfully also replicated the little bit of the leaf that was missing because it was eaten by a caterpillar. These activities also led to some very interesting conversations between students with teachers. This particular conversation exploring what happens to a leaf basically after it falls to the ground or falls to the ground, and why is it that fresh leaves don't burn? And some very interesting questions like, I am observing an Alstonia tree which is flowering, but no butterflies come to visit. Why? So maybe a teacher could take a question like this and turn it into something that the student can think about. So for example, the teacher could ask, but are you sure you monitored the tree at all times? Are you sure that no butterflies come to visit? Or she could draw attention to the fact that Alstonia trees actually have white flowers, which are mostly fragrant in the dusk and evening time. So perhaps the repertoire of pollinators that come to Alstonia includes nocturnal pollinators and butterflies who fly at night. Another group of questions that emerged was how human activity itself was affecting trees. So questions like, my mango tree is close to some construction work. How does that affect my tree and its health? Was something that a child asked a teacher. So with this very preliminary understanding from a very preliminary sort of set of activities that we did in schools, we understood that there's great scope for creating a deeper understanding of the environment among children simply by doing more and more activities that get children to go outdoors and interact with the trees that they're observing, with the plants around them in a more intimate way. So this brings us to the road ahead. Now, Bonnie et al. In 2009 classified citizen science projects into 3 broad categories. The contributive type, where a scientist basically came up with a question and everyone else's involvement in the project was contributing. That they basically gathered data and contributed to understanding this question better. The second was collaborative, where although the question was the question and the method thought of by scientists, the citizen scientists not just contributed to the data, but also at other stages of the citizen science projects, such as during analysis or during image class type of thing. And the last type of citizen science project that they imagined was a co-creative citizen science project, where the citizens themselves came up with a question of interest. They came up with a method to address the question, and they were the ones who gathered information, analyzed it, and in fact even converted that to things that matter to the citizens the most, such as policy intervention. So in this sea of questions, where does a citizen science project stand? So SeasonWatch as of now is a contributive type of citizen science, where there was a predefined question, which is the understanding of tree phenology with seasons and how climate change is affecting that. And all of our citizen scientists basically just contribute data for the better understanding of this particular question. But does this have a scope of becoming something more than just a contributive citizen science program? And for this, again, I'll tell you another story. As to and the idea that cultural references can stand in for baseline. Now, in tropical countries, and especially countries like India, we do not have a written record of many things like plant phenology. However, plant phenology is associated with many cultural things that happen across the country, across different latitudes. There are all kinds of festivals that happen, all kinds of practices that are done. And these are sometimes intimately linked to tree phenology. So the story I'm going to tell you is about this one, Cassia fistula. And I must apologize to those who have already heard this before. So Cassia fistula, or Kanikonna, as it's known in Malayalam, is a tree species that is special to the people of Kerala. And this is because it is a plant that's used extensively in the celebrations of the Malayali New Year. Now, over the past decade or so, people in Kerala have been noticing that this particular tree is the flowers of which are used during Vishu, which is typically on 13th, 14th, or 15th of April every year, does not have enough flowers during the festival time anymore. So much so that there are media reports of people now buying plastic flowers during Vishu because the actual Vishu, the Kanikonna tree, is not having enough flowers during the Vishu time. The other strange thing that they noticed was that this tree was flowering at all times of the year. In December, in November, in September, in January. And this is unusual because flowering in April. So what was it doing flowering in all these other times? So we thought that this is an interesting question, right? It is a question that is of importance to people because they want to understand why a flower that is a beloved part of a cultural practice is not there anymore. So we took all the Kanikonna trees that were monitored across Kerala from 2014 to 2019, and we understand whether actually the flowering of the species was affected, and in fact, actually the flowering times had changed. And what we found was this. So here on the y-axis is percentage trees showing a phenophase. On the x-axis is the week of the year. If you see this light gray line, that indicates the time where Vishu happens and is the expected time of the flowering of the tree. This light gray line indicates trees which had any flower, even if they had 1 or 2 or 3 flowers blooming, that's indicated by this line. But this dark gray line indicates those trees which had lots and lots of flowers. Typically, the Cassia fistula tree is covered in flowers, and flowers, the whole tree synchronously blooms, and it's the peak of the flowering is very discernible because oftentimes even the leaves are replaced completely by the flowers. So this indicates peak flowering in the tree. And we found that there was a peak of flowering coinciding with Vishu, but the peak flowering, when the intensity of flowering was most, seems to have shifted a little bit before the expected Vishu time. And if you also notice that up to 40% of trees were always flowering throughout the year. So something that the people were observing that is not such a strange type of flowering pattern in a culturally important tree was validated with the data. The other thing that there might be a shift in peak flowering was also kind of detected in this data. But then again, this is only 5 years of data, and maybe 10 more years of information would help us discern these changes or shifts in the plant phenology a little bit more. So I would basically like to conclude that uh, uh, the cultural references that we have across the country can stand in for the lack of a baseline understanding. There are several other species which are culturally associated. For example, this Butea monosperma, the flower is ground up into a dye and is used during the festival of Holi. And people from the north here would know that Butea usually typically flowers in profusion around that time, in February and March, uh, during that time. The other cultural association is usually with neem flowering in southern India. So the Kannadiga New Year and Tamil New Year are both coincident with the flowering of neem. Now, this is something that we have not really assessed, and we don't know whether actually the patterns of Butea monosperma and neem have changed over time. Another interesting tree is this non-timber forest product, which is Maduka indica. It's a culturally very important tree. And we know anecdotally from interacting with our citizen scientists that the volume of fruiting might be going down from one year to another. So this is another uh, anecdotal information which can potentially be pursued via the tool of SeasonWatch and addressed at the level of the country. So based on this, I would just like to conclude that citizen science is a great way to identify and address scientific problems. We can even involve the citizen science project in creating more awareness and educating the new generation that is coming in about the about biodiversity, about climate change, etc., using these data, and that cultural references can stand in for the missing scientific baseline that we have in our country. So with that, I would like to end. I hope I'm not overshot. SeasonWatch is a three-way partnership between NCBS, Wipro Foundation, and Nature Conservation Foundation. But none of this work would be possible without partners on ground who actually go and train educators and work with school children. In Kerala, Mathrubhumi Seed; in Meghalaya, the State Council for Science, Technology and Education; and our most recent partners from Central India, Foundation for Ecological Security, and from Kotagiri, the Keystone Foundation. More details about the project are available at our website, www.seasonwatch.in. And if you want to also follow up on some of the scientific results that are presented here, please do visit bioarchive and check out the details. And I would like to end with a big thank you to all the thousands of citizen scientists who have contributed tirelessly information week after week for us to create this kind of understanding about tree phenology in India. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Geetha. That was absolutely fascinating, the science part of it, but also the education which was woven into the citizen science project, which does happen and can happen, in a very deep manner. And then also very fascinating about the cultural aspects as well, and how those could potentially be used. And of course, the Japanese cherry example is an example of a very deep cultural connection, and that's why the monitoring isn't happening for so many hundreds of years in man. So now we have a fair number of questions, probably around 20 or so in the Slack channel. So those participants, please do ask your questions, type in your questions on the channel, which is hashtag day1 28 September Geetha on Slack. There are too many questions to answer, to put to you, all of them right now, Geetha, but of course, hopefully you can respond to all the others that don't get covered in the channel itself. So
I'll do that. I'll go to Slack and answer this question.
Yes. But right now it's for the next 5 or 10 minutes. So let's just 5 minutes perhaps. Let's just take some of the questions here. I'll use my prerogative as moderator. But remember, Geetha will be answering all the questions, so you'll come to it. Let's see, Rashmi Menon asks, suppose a person is living in an apartment in a metro city, is it all right if they observe the phenology of trees around where they live?
Absolutely. Yes. The program is open to anyone, children and adults living anywhere, urban areas, rural areas, forest areas, anywhere. As long as you find the species on our list, you can monitor it from there and upload your observations.
Great. I'm going to skip some questions which I think will be relatively easy to answer by text on Slack, Geetha. So let me combine two questions, one from Shardul Joshi and Krishna Girish, which are very similar. So as in eBird, there are regional reviewers to ensure quality of data. Is there any such mechanism in SeasonWatch so that there are no misidentifications? And similarly, Krishna Girish asks, how could one ensure data accuracy? Wrongly identified tree might lead to inaccurate predictions, a mechanism to ensure the correctness of information.
Right. So right now, the list of species that we have in our program are fairly easy to identify. They are culturally important trees. Typically, people can identify them very easily, and they are locally abundant, and people usually have good information about them. They can identify them easily. But yes, it is definitely a concern where some species may be misidentified. And for that, till now, we don't have a built-in check. But in the future, we are planning to reference observations as soon as they come in against a database that will check for ranges of species. So if somebody has sort of misidentified a species by, say, reporting something that is not expected in that area, it would immediately be flagged. The second thing is we will also build in regional reviewers at a much later stage once this particular pre-check is implemented. But you're right. Right now, we do not have either of these checks in place. But in the future, we will have these checks in place.
Great, thanks, Geetha. So there's a question by Shreya. Given this project is limited by accessibility to website and phone app, can it be scaled up by giving more of a paper pen approach in areas without access to internet? Do you think this can be incorporated?
Absolutely. Actually, most of the children, when they note down, it's actually paper pen. We have an observation sheet that is circulated among the schools, and the children fill in the observation sheets. And this is later on digitized either by a facilitator or by a teacher. So in Kerala, for example, the teacher collects all the observation sheets and she uploads it onto the internet whenever she gets connectivity, etc. In other places where there's a facilitator, like for example in Central India, we have a regional partner and they facilitate collecting information via all of these observation sheets and uploading it onto the website. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Accessibility is a problem, but thankfully till now we have found ways around this. But paper pen is definitely an approach that is already available.
Great, thanks. There is another question from Swapnali Gole. How is the sampling bias addressed in terms of uneven spread of informants?
Yeah, so we try and get more and more people from across the country to observe more and more trees for more and more species, but that's sort of an uphill task. So right now, most of our information comes from Kerala, and therefore we make inferences and summaries based on that, and we acknowledge that as well. So as of now, that's where it stands.
Yeah, thanks. We have time for a couple more questions. Shivani Jadeja asks, in what ways can observations for fruit and flowers be useful beyond accurately informing us of presence? One concern that motivates this question is for plant species that typically produce only a few flowers or fruits per individual. Someone with more knowledge about the species, small number of flowers or fruits as many for that species, where others may consider them few. So how is many and few defined, I think?
So we have a protocol that is taught when we do workshops. That's when the people who are going to be doing this, they are informed about how to go about doing it. Basically, we imagine a circular tree canopy and we divide it like a pie into thirds. And few is when 1/3 or less has that phase, and many is when more than 1/3 of the tree canopy has that phase. So that is the standardized way of measuring fruits and flowers. So even if a tree is producing so-called less fruits and flowers, if you go by this particular protocol, ideally everyone would be measuring it the same way, which is less than 1/3 or less is few, and more than 1/3 is many.
Okay, and last question. Is there a possibility that factors other than climate change, for example, pests, affects the phenology of a tree? How can that be accounted for in the design phase of the project? Oh, sorry, this is by Rajit.
Yes. Yeah. So at present, what we do is we ask people to report all kinds of other things along with phenology, but this is voluntary. So they can report pollinators, caterpillars, and the frugivores that come to their tree. But because this is voluntary, we don't really have enough information on things like herbivores that could be affecting the phenology of the tree. But if more people were to use those options, I think we can, in the future, maybe make some conclusions about this.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Geetha. That was really interesting, and there's lots of interaction. I apologize to those of you who have asked questions which you couldn't get to. But keep checking the channel. Geetha will be responding to all the questions when she has the time. Geetha, I'd ask you to tag the person, reply in the same thread and tag the person's name so that they get a notification in Slack. You can continue asking questions all through the conference, and Geetha, again, we'll request her to answer when she can. When you do ask a question, please do tag Geetha's name so that she gets a notification similarly. And let's continue this conversation. I think there are some maybe 30 or 40 questions and comments right now in the channel. So it's a testament to your wonderful presentation, Geetha, and the interesting work that you do. So thanks to you, Geetha.
Thank you.
And we will take a short break before the next session, about 5 minutes to set up the next session. So head over to the channel, which is called Day 1, 28 September Talks AM. So the morning talks, these are the contributed talks. And that'll be the next session of the day in a few minutes. Just keep, hang out there, grab a cup of tea in the 5 minutes, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you to all of you.